affected so much in the past 25 years by all of the industrial changes that have taken place in this area. Light industrial is only going to further affect our property in a negative way. Consider what is around this area, primarily residential, people who just want to enjoy their homes and yards, families who have lived there for more than 40 to 60 years. Light industrial will only increase tractor trailer rigs, parking that is becoming a problem again on a no parking street, and other items that could propose additional problems with the light industrial development. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up, Josh Pearson.
Good evening, Council. Josh Pearson, 6575 FM 439 in Belton. Just wanted to speak a little bit on agenda item number 5. We do own the property there at 815 Elm Grove Spur. It's taken us a little bit of time to finally get to the point where we know what we want to do with the track, and that is light industrial. We have been able to complete a sewer study in connection with the city that shows the track is served by sewer up to a capacity of which light industrial is a perfect fit. Not for high density residential, not for anything that would put an overload or a burden on that trunk line, but light industrial is a perfect fit. We've got fire flow from the city of Belton, the main line that's there. We've got residential and domestic water from Armstrong, who has agreed in writing to allow the fire flow from the city of Belton. We've got 3-phase power from Encore. We've got multiple prospects that are light industrial prospects that are excited about the property. And I can empathize with the Deckers. I get that if there was an intrusion on my property, I'd be upset too. But honestly, the best thing that we can do with that is to develop this track and see if it is in fact contributing to some of that. And if it is, we can address it, because as you know, we'd have to go through a replat. The city would be very involved in that. The city would have to, would require engineer plans, would require approval. It would come back to you, the council, to approve. And so you would have individual eyes on it. And you could guarantee the Deckers that whatever we're doing with that track is not going to negatively impact them in any way. So just want to encourage you, 7-0 in P&Z, it was approved. Staff votes for approval or gives their endorsement. And so I stand with P&Z, I stand with staff. I ask you to approve that here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Cynthia Hernandez.
Good afternoon, Council. Cynthia Hernandez, 412 East Central, Belton, Texas. I just want to speak in favor of agenda item 5 and asking Council to consider a rezoning to light industrial. As you know, the Belton Economic Development Corporation was the initial applicant for the rezoning, and we've worked with a number of prospects for this site. We think this is a great extension of light industrial. There are not a lot of opportunities for light industrial in Belton, and this just helps to continue to diversify the city's tax base and facilitate job growth in our community. And so we ask your consideration in the zoning request.
Thank you, Cynthia. All right. Any other general public comments? All right. There being none, we will close the public hearing or public comments and start with the consent agenda. Items 3 and 4. I'll just read it. Items 3 and 4 under this section are considered to be routine by the city council and may be enacted by one motion. If discussion is desired by the council, any of the items can be removed at the request of any council member separately. Item 3 is the minutes of the June 13th, 2013 city council meeting. Item 4 is a resolution authorizing publication of a notice of public hearing regarding voluntary annexation of approximately 5.78 acres located on Taylor's Valley Road. The chair will entertain a motion.
I move we approve consent agenda items 3 and 4.
Second.
There's a motion and second. Any other discussion? There being none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, passes unanimously. All right, item 5 is planning and zoning. All right, Tina, so this will be your section for the next several.
Mr. Mayor, I must recuse myself on this
zoning
item.
change from agricultural to single family residential district to light industrial on approximately 51.341 acres located at 849 Elm Grove Spur at the southeast intersection of Elm Grove Spur and Capitol Way. Ms. Moore. Oh, Craig. Oh, yeah. Craig is going to be recusing himself from this particular item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everyone. I hope you guys are all well today. This property before you, you've heard this hearing a couple of times, is located off on the east side of Interstate 35, just off of Grove Road and Capitol Way. Here's a zoomed in look. This property is currently undeveloped. This property, you might recall, was recently zoned to single family 1 last year to allow for single family detached residential on the north side. The rest of the area is zone agricultural. For the properties to the west, they're zone light industrial and commercial type zoning. Properties to the north is zone agricultural, and that's some of that is rural Bell County, and they're all developed as single family residential. Same for the property just to the east of the site. The future land use map identified this area for low density residential use. Although it's not reflected, should this be approved tonight, we will recommend with the update of the comprehensive plan that this be reflected as an industrial should it be approved tonight. And the remainder of the property just south of here, we will keep as low density residential. All right, this was originally submitted in by the Belton Economic Development Corporation, but now the property owner wants to go forth with the zoning change for that. It was initially developed for single family residential Foxwood Ranch subdivision, but there were some issues with developing that. So the applicant is requesting for light industrial zoning instead. Should this be approved, the proposed zoning would allow for the property to be developed for light industrial uses, including research offices, manufacturing, warehousing type use, anything that's allowed in the light industrial zoning district. The property exceeds the minimum requirement for the light industrial property zoning. With that, water in this area, the city recently installed water and wastewater line in this area. However, this is in the Armstrong Water CCN, and the applicant will be able to connect to the city for fire protection in this area. Wastewater, we recently did a capacity study, a flow monitoring test for this area. The results came back that industrial use and commercial use would be supported with the development of this lot, should they need to connect to city wastewater. For streets in this area, the streets that need to be developed are Elm Grove Road is a local road. We will be looking for a right of way and possibly some extension of that roadway. Capitol Way is also designated as a collector road, which requires 80 feet of right of way. We'll be looking for 40 feet of right of way from the property owner. Also feature Shanklin Road is also shown on here, and that is actually an arterial roadway. And we'll be looking for 120 feet of right of way. The applicant will be responsible for 60 feet of that right of way. Additionally, feature Mesquite Road, it was shown on the Thereford plan. However, with our new alignment, it will actually connect to Capitol Way and future Shanklin. And this is actually the plans that kind of show that alignment. Notices were provided to property owners within 200 feet of the property. We did get a couple, actually no letters, but we did receive input from them during the public hearings. With that, staff is recommending approval of the zoning change, and the Planning and Zoning Commission heard this item at their meeting back in April and also recommended approval of the zoning change. With that, the development of the lot shall conform to all standards in the light industrial zoning district. It shall comply with all of our adopted standards, design standards, including site development, landscaping, tree protection, and preservation. A subdivision plat will be required, and civil plans and building plans will need to be reviewed. That concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer questions you have.
Right. Any questions for Tina?
I have a quick question, Tina. You talked about what capacity the current sewer lines could handle. And did it show what it couldn't handle?
That would be residential, higher impact, higher density residential.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? There being none, the chair will entertain a motion.
I make a motion to approve agenda item 5 as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion on this item?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, as bringing this motion forward for the neighbors, this is just a zoning change. We can do so much more under plat review and can make sure that there's a significant level of engineering study and I can assure we'll do everything in our power to make sure it's done right.
I just want to add to that. I think the drainage concerns are significant that have been brought up in the past with this issue, with this property. The council's opportunity to address drainage issues come in the platting process. Planning and zoning is a commission, and so planning is kind of one hand of that, and zoning is another hand of that, and they go at the same time a lot of times. But when we're talking about a plat and we're talking about zoning, there's really kind of sometimes two unique things that need to be looked at there. And the drainage issues that we've heard, I think, are significant and need to be addressed. And there's nothing in a zoning ordinance that really addresses that, but there is in the platting process. And so I think the issues that we've heard are important. I think that there are solutions to that for the neighbors who are concerned about that. That we can work toward once this property gets further developed and platting becomes a part of that discussion.
Well said, thank you. And if, I appreciate you guys coming to the meeting and speaking every time, and we have heard your concerns. The drainage issue is serious. If there's anything during the interim that Mr. Pearson could do to maybe alleviate that in some form or fashion, hay bale, berm, whatever it might be. But we've already spoke of a retention pond and other ways to mitigate drainage that comes to you. And I'd also just like to say that if there's any way to make light industrial look like neighborhood services, I'm in favor of that and trying to help that fit in to an area where housing is so close and longtime residents have been there. I think it will be hard to develop property like this along the highway, or not to develop property like this along the highway in the future. And if we can just be conscious of our neighbors and citizens and try to do it in a nice manner and ensure that they aren't flooded and it fits in well, I think we'll all be successful.
Yeah, and I'll echo that and just let you guys know that engineering and drainage analysis is not a suggestion, it's a requirement at the platting process, but not at the zoning process. So everything has to be considered. All right, any other discussion? All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of this item, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay, passes 6 with 1 abstention. All right, that's item 5. Okay, item 6, just for you guys who may not be familiar. So we will hold a public hearing and we will also consider, that's two different things. The public hearing, you guys get to talk to us. We get to listen. We don't get to talk back. Not meant that way, but and the consideration, we get to talk and then you guys don't get to talk back. So anyway, so just letting you know, Dave Covington will give you basically, he'll raise his hand at 15 seconds. So as you guys talk for 3 minutes, and then he'll let you know. And if I were you, I would stick with 3 minutes because it's Dave. So, all right. So we will now hold a public hearing and consider a zoning change from agricultural to planned development, commercial 1 PDC1 district on approximately 15.8 acres located at 2406 Lake Road, generally located west of FM 2271 and east of Sparta, to establish an RV park. Ms. Moore.
And thank you, Mr. Mayor. This property, again, this is the third time this has came before the commission. It is located off of Lake Road at this location. This property is currently used as a mobile home park. There's currently about 9 mobile homes that are still in the area. The zoning for this property is currently agricultural. The surrounding zonings are also agricultural and single family 1, 2, and 3 in this area for single family detached residential houses. The applicant has submitted this revised application to allow for an RV park with cabins and amenities. The property is 15.836 acres. Proposes 36 cabins. They are 1 to 3 bedrooms and 36 RV lease spaces, an office, clubhouse, a boat, rental area, outdoor amenities. Here is a table that shows all of the different submissions and what has changed throughout the submissions. So for this, again, the RV, it initially started out as 51, they reduced it to 36. The cabins also initially started out as 40 and they reduced it to 36. For proposed screening, they initially started out with a 6-foot wooden fence. They're now proposing an 8-foot concrete stone wall around the property. Allowable land use, should the zoning be approved, it would allow for an RV park and campgrounds at the site with the commercial one requirements for minimum area and setbacks. Any other changes that they may have in the future will come back to the commission and city council for consideration and should they make any changes. For the area, this exceeds the requirements for the for the commercial one district. It requires, actually, there's also the RV park requirements that requires a minimum of 1 acre, and this exceeds that is 15.84 acres. Here is what the applicant is proposing. Access to the site will be off of Lake Road, and that would be a gated entrance. There's circular path for travel lanes that's shown on the plans. And most of that will be one way around the outer loops and 2-way on the internal ones. The width of the RV spaces meet our minimum requirements, and that's, I want to say 1,500 square feet for the RV pads, and the cabins also meet our requirements. Also, there's quite a wide separation between the perimeter fence and where the first cabinet is. Here is the exterior, actually the bottom half of the property. Again, that's circulation is proposed. And also that is a look at the retaining wall that they are proposing. Here's a closer look at that screening fence. All right, for RV park, they got to follow the City Code of Ordinance, Chapter 19. Again, the minimum acre is 1 acre. They exceed that. Density is 20 units per acre. They're approximately 4.6 per acre. The private streets, they're 20 feet wide for the 1-way and 24 for the 2-way. The surface that's proposed is, I believe, asphalt, concrete or asphalt are required. There's a requirement for 8% open space. They're exceeding that with the different amenities that they are providing. Screening is required for an RV park, and they're proposing that 8-foot stone concrete fence. There is gated access to the park off of Lake. Water and wastewater, it will utilize City of Belton water services. There is available wastewater connection through the existing neighborhood that they will need to tap into. Again, the RV sites meet the minimum requirements. Parking is 1.2 parking spaces. They're proposing 2 parking spaces for each side plus additional boat parkings available. For refuse, they have adequate refuse that's shown. 6 is proposed throughout the site. There's also adequate restrooms and shower proposed. Also, the cabins are equipped with their own showers and restrooms. In response to public comments from previous meeting, the applicant has provided a draft rules and regulation for the park. That will be self-administered and not enforced by the city. The future land use map identified this as residential use. Notices were sent out to property owners within 200 feet of the property. We received 1 written letter of protest from Mr. Helms. He has concerns about the development of the site. Additionally, there were a lot of people that spoke at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for both in support and both in opposition. Majority of the residents within that 200 feet spoke in opposition of the zoning change. In conclusion, the applicant has made an attempt to address concerns that were expressed earlier, and he has provided a revised application, including the reduction of the cabins to 36 and 36 RV leasable spaces. He's modified the screening buffer that's proposed to an 8-foot concrete fence, and he's proposing operating conditions to be self-administered by the management. The Planning and Zoning heard this item at their meeting on on June 20th, and they voted to recommend approval for the zoning changes. Due to the inconsistencies with our future land use map, staff has recommended disapproval of the zoning change. Should you approve it, we recommend the following. The use of the property shall conform to commercial 1 district. In addition, recreation vehicle park is permitted as per the PD site plan and PD ordinance. Development of the site shall conform to the type 14 design standards, which includes site development standards, includes building standards, and landscape and tree preservation standards. Sign standards shall conform to our existing sign ordinance. A subdivision plat and development plans are required. The use of the property shall conform to all aspects of the resort and nomad rules and regulation. That concludes my presentation. Should you have any questions for me?
All right, thank you, Tina. What we'll do is we'll start the public hearing, and then during our consideration, we'll ask specific questions if there are any. There's a handful of you guys that would like to speak, obviously maybe for or against. Again, reminder, this is a time for you to speak, and you will be limited to 3 minutes. First one is Zoe Grant. Name and address for the record. Thank you.
Zoe Grant, 510 East Avenue J, Temple, Texas.
I apologize for getting a presentation that you guys ready.
Oh, I thought she was speaking.
Come back.
Your own public comments, right, on this item? Yeah, okay, that's good. That's
Okay, Mike said go.
30 seconds left. No, not really.
I'm here to speak on the approval of the resorts at Nomads. A lot of the information presented here, I'm going to break it down real short and maybe skip some slides to get into 3 minutes. The main thing is that we did hear everything that the citizens required or requested and what the city has required, and we've met all of those needs with the 8-foot limestone, a concrete wall that will cut down on some of that sound. And then keeping that separation from the wall into the RV park so that the noise pollution would not be as much. And that's just a section of how far we are away from the actual fence that is proposed or wall. So of course, the existing land use is beautiful shaded trees, and we plan on staying with that with the tree preservations. 15.836 acres of beautiful, beautifully designed site with swimming pool, custom cabins, fishing ponds, play areas, park, pet park, camping tents, and event center. And these are just pretty pictures, just so you can see. And I want you to point out that I know they wore red shirts, but I have the red slippers. So I'm clicking my heels 3 times because there's no place like Nomads. 3 bedrooms, 2 bedroom and 1 bedroom cabins, beautifully designed, beautifully constructed. They're not just cheaply put together. Fishing ponds. I know there was a lot of concerns about drainage going into the adjacent property, and hopefully when we get ready to do the design, we will meet with those residents and do a site visit. Maybe this, I'm definitely sure this will stop your drainage issues from things coming over into your yard. A lot of climbing, a lot of play, even room for our little furry friends. And then the tent and camping. So a lot of togetherness with the families within this site. 24 by 24/7 surveillance. And of course, a lot of the others will talk on the rules and regulations. Can you imagine you being there? Washteria restrooms throughout the campsite. Public restrooms as permitted. And of course, a lot of participation with other organizations and or businesses within the area. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. You timed that just right. Appreciate it. Thanks, Zoe. All right. The next person I have is Carlos Garcia.
Carlos Garcia, 1230 Alamosa Lane, Temple, Texas. That's my address. I am one of Sherman's business partners in the store and also in the park. What we're trying to accomplish here is bring something more luxurious to the area instead of that, little rundown trailer park that's there. We're trying to build something that will bring more people to the lake, to the resort, and just upgrade what's there. I mean, and not just a little upgrade, a $6 million upgrade. So we're just not spending a dollar. I mean, we could easily spend $500,000 and put 100 trailers in there, but we're opposed to that. We want to make this nice. We want to make it nice for the community. We've lived here a long time, so we want it to grow. I mean, so that's just what we're proposing. I mean, change is hard and we want to be a good neighbor. So we're willing to listen to all our neighbors and listen to all their concerns and work with them to make that change work for everybody. You know, and I think this will increase all the values in the area. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos. Next person is Thomas Helm.
Thank you, council. So I live at
okay.
2507 Twin Ridge Court, so I'm right next door to this. Couple points I have. I'm retired from 40 years in the commercial construction industry. Has anybody seen a pro forma on this project? Because what they're proposing and the numbers I've heard don't make sense to me. You know, it's going to cost a lot more than $4 or $5 million to turn this into a going concern. And then who will enforce the law? Because TREC, the Texas Real Estate Commission, and the Texas Supreme Court decision 627/2016 said the counties are not responsible. It's the cities. So is the city of Belton going to be encumbered with enforcing these ordinances, noise, you know, whatever? So it comes down to the city. And, you know, I don't understand why here, because, you know, to me, it doesn't make sense to be that this is going to be profitable for anybody other than maybe 6 months a year. You know, I can't imagine that people are going to want to come to Belton, you know, in the middle of winter or whatever. I mean, even this time of year with the lake being down as it is. But and then there is they show on their diagram that there's a sewer line that's going to come through Red Rock Hills into the Twin Ridge Court. I don't know if there's an easement for that. I don't know whose property that goes through. That would be something that would be very important to look at. I don't know. I'm just, you know, we're against it. I mean, you know, it's a single family neighborhood area, you know. I'm concerned about noise. I'm concerned about transients, you know, who's going to enforce how long an RV can stay? You will? Okay.
15 seconds.
He just volunteered for a second job.
Yeah. I'll hold you to that, Dave. Yeah, anyhow,
Yeah, thank you.
that's
Appreciate.
all I
Yeah,
have to say.
thank you. Thanks for coming. All right. Next on the list is Brenda Howard.
Thank you for listening to Mr. Sharma's story and his recommendations. Yet again, he has a dream, as all Americans.
Name and address for
Oh,
the
sorry.
record. Thank you.
Brenda Howard, 5613 Hamlet Drive, Belton, Texas. Thank you. I got too excited about this
No
whole
worries,
dream
no
thing.
worries.
Yes. So I am Brenda Howard. I'm speaking for the development of Resort at Nomads, which is currently known as Shady Meadows on Lake Road. I strongly recommend approval of the rezoning, mostly because it really is Mr. Sharma's dream. He owns the property. He has a mobile home park. We know that he can put 70 mobile homes on it. That's what it's zoned for right now. And he has a vision for improving it. If you've driven out there, you've seen it, you know what it's like. Every resident complaint that I heard last year on July 12th, Mr. Sharma has addressed. He's actually decreased the amount of profit he would receive in order to decrease the number of units that would be in there. He's built this retention pond so there won't be an issue with the flooding. And if there was flooding, he'd build another retention pond. He really is a good man. And he would be a good neighbor. And you can see that as each one of these plans, he addresses an 8-foot beautiful stone wall. It's just fantastic. So I obviously argue in for it. And the last speaker, just to address this, right now, it would be 70 mobile homes. So there wouldn't be all of the stone wall and all of the things that he's proposing with this beautiful RV park. So I think that would be better than what is there that exists now. So thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. Next is Sherry. It's ILSE. How do you pronounce it? Ilse. All right. I would have gotten it wrong.
Sorry, you got my first name right.
Yeah.
That's a plus. So Sherry Ilse, 1605 Sandbar Circle. I have been to every single one of these meetings talking against this proposal. This will be basically my backyard. So I have a lot of concerns about what will be behind me. Like I've said before, I'm worried about noise, worried about the light pollution, the transient people that would be coming in. I'm also concerned about the traffic on 439. If I try to get out of my neighborhood now on 435 or 439, it's very hard to get out. The traffic is 55 miles per hour and they're going that or faster. Just trying to get my single car out takes a long time. So I'm worried about these cars coming out with these RVs, with boats, with trailers, and being able to get out. It's a 2-lane right there. There's no turn lane and there's no real side for them to turn onto. I'm also concerned about this fence that's going up. They say it's this great stone fence that's going to come up. Well, it's also said concrete as an option as well. Then there's the 3 fences. What's going on between the 3 fences? Is it being taken care of between the fences? Are they going to allow the homeowners to tie into that fence? Or is it a space between the stone, between the fence, and then between their fence? I don't know. There was a lot of fences going on. I understand that they did that to help with noise, but it's questions. I have been here, everyone, and it's always been great project, wrong place. So I know that they were saying that on 439, they wanted to do commercial. All of those businesses that are commercial there do not go back into subdivisions where there are several single-family homes right against it. I've also questioned about if there's ever been the environmental study done on all of the sewer, water, rainwater. I get like 2 feet of water coming in behind my fence at times when we get, large storms. I'm just against it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for your persistence. Going to all of them. All right. Next one is Kelsey Vitek. Maybe I got that right. Hey.
Kelsey Vitek, 1603 Sandbar Circle. So I've been to one other meeting and against this project, although I think it's a very cool project. I can tell there's been a lot of time and money and effort, energy put into it. I still fall back on great project, wrong location. So I wanted to dig a little bit deeper. Like, it can't just be the same argument over and over because we've all heard it, and it's kind of repetitive at this point. So I feel like I wanted to dive a little bit deeper and see where the precedent has been set across from the city of Belton and through the city council. So a precedent of short-term rentals and transient occupants has already been set by the city of Belton. So currently, I know this is not a short-term rental. I know it's not identified as a short-term rental, but it still has a similar occupant. It's a transient occupant that comes and goes in and out, right? So same concept as a short-term rental. So currently, the ordinance in the city has a short-term rental that must be only one with every 500-foot radius. And I'm going to quote just for reference, I'm sure y'all probably know this, but in the ordinance, it currently says the purpose of the ordinance is to safeguard the life, health, safety, welfare, and property of the occupants of residential dwelling units, the neighborhoods of said occupants, and the general public. And it goes further. It says the intent of the ordinance is to preserve the neighborhood character and residential subdivisions within the city of Belton and to minimize adverse impacts to residential subdivisions caused by short-term rentals. So again, I know this is not considered a quote unquote short-term rental, but again, you have the same occupant coming in and out day and day. And again, kind of going back to it, who polices how long they're there. So for reference, the 500-foot, just for a visual reference, is about a football field and a half, is about the length of 500 feet. So currently there's more than 20 homes that border this particular project, and most of them have less than 100 feet distance from their property line to a campground. So again, I know they're not the same, but it's the same occupant. It's the same transient person that's coming in and out next to single family homes. And what has been set as a precedent, I think, needs to be consistent across the board to protect neighborhoods, to protect subdivisions, and more importantly, to protect homeowners. So I don't think that putting a concrete wall, it doesn't negate the fact that there is a transient occupant on the other side of this 8-foot concrete wall. And while I support small business, I just can't get on board with encroaching on homeowners in a subdivision and people that call this home.
Thank you. Next up is Rachel. You're going to have to help me with your last name. Ramsar. Okay, that's the way I would have said it. So.
Rachel Ramasar, 1604 Sandbar. And I basically just want to echo what the last two ladies said. I've been to, this is my third one of these. I am recommending not approving the resort at Nomads. I have concerns about noise and light pollution. I do think it's a great idea, but I don't think it's a good location. And I think that what they talk about as far as trying to have like the 9 p.m. curfew and all that stuff, I just feel like that's really unrealistic for a resort. People don't come to a resort to go to bed early and to be quiet. And I understand that like an RV park is maybe a quieter thing, but they're trying to make this a big family thing. And I think trying to keep that quiet so that it's not causing a problem for local residents is a big concern. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Jim Hightower is up next.
Jim Hightower, 320 North 9th, Temple, Texas. I'm very familiar with this property. I developed Dawson Ranch and Regatta Oaks, which borders this property. And what was there was not a asset to help sell those lots that we developed. And so what was there is not been good for the last 20 years. And it needs to change. This is by far the most productive project that I've seen as far as getting something done. So change is always scary, but if you drive around to some of the upscale RV parks that are in the area, they're not loud. There aren't bright lights. There's not a lot going on. There's a number of them you can visit. And so I would very much encourage everybody to approve it.
Thank you, Jim. Greg Daniel, Mr. Daniel.
My name is Gregory Daniel. I live at 3206 Wildcatter. Over a decade of service to Belton, Mayor Jim Covington created something uniquely Belton along Nolan Creek. It's no wonder retail shops and restaurants have flourished in downtown Belton. To this day, business around Nolan Creek delivers increasing tax revenue for the city. Covington had his creek, Sharma has his lake. In the 1980s, there were cabins in the area in front of dead fish. For some of us, cabins on Sharma's property is nostalgic. The trees, the beautiful grass, the view of the lake are uniquely Belton. There is no better place for Sharma to take us back in time. Go buy a package of bait from Sharma and he'll tell you a detailed story of fishing with his son on Lake Belton. A gathering place for family, nostalgic, historic cabins, beautiful scenery, trees, and wildlife. Sharma's product contains all things Belton. In 2011, a decision was made by Belton's P&Z to zone property facing 439 commercial. Dead Fish Cafe, boat storage, a bait shop, a drive-through beverage barn are just a few commercial sites facing FM 39 that surround Sharma's property. Last Tuesday, P&Z approved this project 4-2. It's a perfect location, perfect time. Belton's leaders have defended owner property rights since this town was incorporated in 1552. I have an audio clip if you don't mind playing.
Okay.
Came here because they wanted to control their own people. They owned property. They didn't want people coming in, forcing them to cut their fees, or forcing them to build this kind of house. When you start controlling neighboring property, it might be a dangerous situation.
Yep, thank you. All right, next up is Jeff Howard.
Jeff Howard, 5613 Hamlet Drive, Belton. Mayor, council, good evening. Sure you've all heard this before. The government is best, which governs the least. It's a favorite quote from Henry David Thoreau of mine. You know, government at any level has very few responsibilities, primarily providing services for citizens such as fire, police, EMS, water, sewage, and roads. But the primary purpose of our government and elected representatives at any levels to protect the rights of the most vulnerable minority, and that's the individual. They'll protect the most basic of human rights, and that's property rights. Property rights are based upon the principle that you own yourself. If you own yourself, then you own the fruits of your labor. If the fruits of your labor are not protected, none of us would labor in the first place. In situations where property rights are not secure, there is very little incentive to spend hours on labor and investing in that labor if it's so easily stolen or abused. Property rights are fundamental. If the investment of labor and economic decision that benefits the whole community is to be encouraged, the rights of private property ownership have to be protected. Even the 8th commandment, thou shalt not steal, presumes ownership and property rights. The very basic litmus test for property rights, according to Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, is whether property owner has a right to use and dispose of his property as he sees fit, even if it means if he's being irrational, arbitrary, capricious, or even unjust. Mr. Sharma is doing none of that. He simply wants to exercise his own property rights in order to provide for his own well-being and that of the community by providing another much-needed business for the city of Belton and provide another venue for the tourist industry in Belton. You know, just a few months ago, the Foundation for Regulation and Additional Taxation for Short-Term Rentals in Belton was approved by the City Council. Those additional funds from those short-term rentals are supposed to go towards one thing, to strengthen the tourist industry in Belton. Here's an opportunity. You know, here we are again discussing his project to improve the community, using the fruits of his own labor on his own property. What harm to the Belton community will a multi-million-dollar luxury RV park have? I don't think there is any. I think absolutely none. I would believe, and 4 members of the Planning and Zoning Commission also believe, it would actually enhance and raise the property values of those living nearby compared to what exists on that property right now. is that the character that you want to preserve at that site? I don't think anybody does. So therefore, I'm for it. And I would implore this government body to perform its basic function and to protect the most fundamental of all rights, most fundamental of human rights, and that's property rights. So I would urge you to approve this from Mr. Sharma.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next person up is Jason Williams.
Council. Jason Williams, 6373 Eagle Point Main Street, Belton. I just want to give a little history. I'm Sharma's partner in this. I graduated high school in 91 from Temple. My wife and I live here. We've been here almost 40 years. I was a franchisee for CC's Pizza, opened the first store on the East Coast, owned 30 restaurants. It's one of the top large group operators. We've opened new locations, built shopping centers. We acquired existing locations. So as far as how we're going to run this thing, I know it's really not what y'all's concern is, but it's going to be a well-ran property. And we're going to open plenty more after this as well. As you know, it's an existing mobile home park. I know right now they're having issues with noise and I think chickens or roosters or something. And that's something that we're going to help out with. The volunteer park is right there. We've got the Frank's Marina. We've got the Dead Fish. We've got the stores right there. It's a great location. We have ingress and egress figured out. Of course, property appreciation is going to go up. We've got high-end guests. And most everybody knows that RV parks are a good place to go and be quiet and campfire. And when it gets dark, it is a quieter thing. And we're going to, with the stone wall, that's going to also be a big help with the setback and with the cabins being on the house side. I live in Westcliff Park. I live right over Westcliff Park, and it's an absolute joy to see those motorhomes there. When they're not there, it's a concern for me, right? When the lake's down, but tourism is what we need to keep building here. And yeah, that's it. I appreciate y'all's time.
Thank you. All right, Tommy Gage. Thomas.
Tommy Gage. I live at 501 Red River in Belton. I'm a general contractor in the Temple Belton area. I would like to start off by saying thank you for your time this evening and your service to the city of Belton. I'm here on behalf of Sharma as his project manager and general contractor for the Nomads Resort. I was not involved in the previous presentations before P&Z or your council, but I am hopeful for a favorable outcome this evening as we got the vote last week in P&Z. We now have the support of John Keela, John Howe, Jason Carruthers, the builders of the surrounding subdivisions, as well as Jim Hightower, who developed Regatta and Dawson's Ranch, as well. He owns Dead Fish and Frank's Marina. Since the last presentation, we have made significant changes and, in my opinion, addressed the major concerns previously presented. We're building an 8-foot wall. Everyone's talked about it all night. Along the perimeter, we will divert all water runoff to a retention pond to be used as a fishing pond for the guests. We have reduced the number of overall units at a significant cost of profits to the owner. We have reconfigured the resort to create greater sound barrier from our neighbors. We have created a comprehensive list of rules for the resort guests and enforced by 24-hour site management. On-site management, there will be a 9 p.m. to 7 a.m. noise curfew or control, no fireworks, no firearms. We will have daily site inspections, weekly groundskeeping by landscaping. There will be a maintenance contract to address and remedy daily issues as they arise. We will address all light pollution towards the resort and away from the neighbors. It will be a gated community with all guests checking in at the office with confirmed background checks, as well as 24-hour security monitoring. Any other concerns, bring them to the table. We will find a solution. We want to be good neighbors. This is going to be a $6 million development in the place of a dilapidated and rundown mobile home park, in which the alternative is to fill this place up with 71 mobile homes, and it will become exactly what everyone hears. As he has to generate an income from his investment. We are going to raise the property values and the values of those around us. We will go from paying approximately $4,000 a year in property taxes to roughly or more than $4,000 a month is what we have projected. We're going to create job opportunities during construction and for the long-term upkeep, maintenance, and management of the facility. We have one of the most beautiful lakes in the state of Texas. This is the right place. This is the right time. These guests are going to eat in our local restaurants, shop in our grocery stores, purchase fuel from our gas stations, enjoy our lake, our marina. This is a win for the city of Belton and its citizens. We are pro-growth for the city of Belton. We are pro-tourism for the city of Belton. I'm sorry?
15 seconds.
We are pro-job creation. We are pro-business for Belton. And thank you again for your time this evening, your service to the city of Belton. I would appreciate your vote in support of this project and for the growing of our local economy. I'll respond to any questions or concerns by the council if given the opportunity.
All right.
Thank
Thank you, sir. Next I have is Ann Kennedy.
Hi, I'm Ann Kennedy, 3202 Breakers Cove, Belton. Thank y'all for your time tonight. This is another time that I've gotten to come up and speak before the council. So thank you all for the opportunity. But I live in the neighborhood right adjacent to the cul-de-sac that backs right up to it. And my daughter actually wrote a letter to the council asking that this RV park resort park not pass. Just from her perspective, she did some research and talked about property value. It's very cute, but we talked about this because it's a big deal involving our family, and just knowing that you can say that it's going to raise property values, but how can you really? I've heard them say that in other meetings. How can you really guarantee that? Like, it has to be put off extremely well, be really excellent. And honestly, thinking about all the restrictions on the guests at the property, I bet they would have way more fun at a different location than having to be backed up to a neighborhood where there are more restrictions, because they don't, you do go to you get to have an enjoyable time. And sometimes when you're up next to a neighborhood, you have to be quieter. You have to be more mindful of the people there. So I think, like we've said, all 3 or 4 meetings before this, nice project, wrong location. The location has not changed. The project may have been modified a little bit, but the project has not, or the location has not changed. We've had businesses on that road. It's all frontage. It does not back up to the neighborhood. We have, like Kelsey said, 20 families that back up to that. And I know there's a lot of builders that may be in favor of this, but they don't live there. And so as a mom with children playing in those neighborhoods, that back up to it, you just really don't know who's there. I know you think that it's going to be these high-end guests, but it's also a little bit more affordable housing too. And so I've seen people in RV parks, even if they are labeled a resort, that they go and they camp out and they live there. And I know there's a 90-day thing, but you can get up and move to another spot. I don't know exactly how they would do it, but I have seen people who take up residence there. And so it just is concerning to me that kind of people would want to live there, because you could blend in pretty easily. So anyway, I am against this project. I think it's a beautiful thing to want to grow Belton, but I do not think this is the right location, especially in my neighborhood. So thank you.
Thank you. That's all I had that signed up. If anyone else came intending to talk to this matter, let us know. All right, that's it. All right. All right, we will now close the public hearing. Thank you guys, both sides, for coming and voicing your concern. We will now consider the zoning change for this property. So any questions, comments from council, or a motion?
I'll start off just by saying that this is my short stint so far. This is probably the most challenging item that's come across, just because for me, an opportunity to develop a piece of property that changes to commercial property tax brings in taxes that we're trying to grow and offset that burden on homeowners, keep their taxes low. On the other hand, some of you that spoke against it, I've been in your homes, I live in your neighborhood. So that's what makes it, hard on this front. But, I see what he's done. He's addressed every issue that's come forward. To me, the wall is a big deal. That was the same problem HEB had when they wanted to come to town, and they were basically going into a neighborhood. But then on the flip side, I live a stone's throw from the corner of it, and would be affected by the same light pollution, noise pollution, things like that. So I think it's just that this is a challenging one for me. So, but I just wanted to say thank you to each of you that continue to come out every single time. Those of you that put your time, your money, your diligence into this, it's definitely appreciated. It also makes it way more entertaining than when there's 35 empty seats out there. You get to see 35 smiling, frowning, angry, happy, whichever face you got on today. So.
Yeah, just some questions. And I guess probably my main question is long-term rentals. I think RV parks have become kind of low-income housing. I checked a couple of reviews and looked at what we have available around us. And some of those reviews said the majority of the occupants are long-term rentals, and there's very little turnover from week to week. That's a concern. Increased density, as the chief said at one of the meetings last week, increased density equals increased crime problems. And I just don't know, it's nothing against the owner or the developer, but if they sold this a year from now, who ensures that this whole list of things they're promising to do gets done? Nobody. And we have an RV park, whether it's a resort or not, an RV park there that we changed the zoning on and allowed to go in, that has no oversight, or an owner that doesn't care or just goes to kaput. And that worries me. That worries me. And the parking, I think there's 9 pull-through or drive-through slots for the resort. The rest is kind of back end or more trailer oriented. I worry about the parking on the cabins. And I just don't know how you maintain and police all that and keep it a good, safe environment are some of my concerns. And, the fishing pond, that looked like it was really detention pond, maybe the size of 3 of those cabins. And how does that work out long-term? I just, you've made so many adjustments and come back, but I don't know if an RV park is the right development for that property. I think that probably is multifamily or single family or something along those lines. And our what is it? Our land use map. I think 439 is an issue. Traffic's an issue. Boats in and out, trailers, parking, density. I just have some concerns.
Yeah, I think for me, the question is not, is an RV park a good idea? Is it a good idea here, nestled inside a little horseshoe of 3 sides, essentially single family residential? Project is fine. It looks like it's probably a place that I'd like to take my family on vacation, but I just don't think it's the right place for the project. I don't think it's the highest and best use for this particular piece of land.
It's a hard one. I voted for it the other 2 times. So I think it's a great project. It's challenging to listen to the opposition because I'm in those shoes too. And I'm certainly not nearly as close, but close. There's a lot of traffic in that area growing. And if I'm not mistaken, this is a zoning change similar to the others. And I'm not sure if there's things that could be addressed after zoning that could further support the project. Some of the reasoning that I shared before was that, I'm concerned if it's a developer from California or somewhere coming in, buying that property and doing something. It's a little different for me when it's a homegrown, someone trying to really improve their own property. It's just really difficult on both sides because I see both sides. And I do love the tourism component, and I'm a former tourism professional, and we do need that. And the location and nestled where it is may not be the greatest location, but the location close to the lake and Dead Fish Grill and some of the things that have grown out that way that we never saw coming in the future either does make it to me a little bit more of an appropriate location. But again, I share some of the concerns because of where it is in the housing, but I also see an exciting project being proposed.
Craig?
Thanks, Mayor. My understanding is that given what is there now and what Mr. Sharma's grandfathered rights are, that he could indeed put 70 to 71 trailers on that property with really very little that we could do about it. Is that correct?
Actually, that property is zone agricultural. For it to be used as a mobile home park, it will need to go through a zoning change. It's not a grandfathered right. It would need a zoning change.
So what
It's an existing use. If he wants to
what
change
can he
use,
do without requiring a zoning change? And it's current, I mean, he's using it as a trailer park now. Can he move in more trailers in the trailer park?
That is not accurate. What is currently there is grandfathered. The 9 that's existing there, they can remain there. However, to add additional, there's stuff that needs to be addressed. So he would need to go through a zoning change. Additionally, there's some problems with the septic. He would need to show some wastewater improvements for that area.
Okay. Seems to me that Mr. Sharma and his partners have done all they can possibly do to make this project as friendly to the neighbors around it as it can be. He does own the property. And so the question that we wrestle with is in the zoning of whether this is, we're balancing his property rights with the rights of those around him and whether it's appropriate for us to change the zoning. It's a tough call. I agree. I've been on council for over 15 years, and this is one of the toughest ones we've had. But I think it comes down to having done all that can be done with an 8-foot fence protecting the neighbors around, with a PD that requires, which is enforceable, whereas the rules, et cetera, that are proposed are certainly brought forward in good faith, no question. But that's not something we can enforce. If there's noise ordinance violations, then that takes a call to not necessarily 911, but to the BPD desk and say, hey, we've got folks violating your noise ordinance. It's not what's written there. That can be handled by the on-site person if indeed that continues. And John's point of what happens if it changes hands is a valid one. But given all that we've been through on this, I think we have to enforce what we can enforce. And that includes the lighting concerns, the concerns of noise abatement, et cetera, the fencing, the building of what will be on whatever is brought forward in the planning process. And then the other ordinances that pertain to the rest of our citizens as well. But it seems reasonable to me to allow the owner of the property to build a project as is proposed in the PD. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Any other comments?
I certainly agree with everybody's statement that it's one of the more difficult balancing acts that we've had to go through in some time. And we're balancing property rights, as was pointed out, are extremely important to all of us, but they also apply to the ones who've been there for some time and invested their homes and their life savings into those homes. And I still feel the same way that I did before. I appreciate the efforts to make it more amenable to the neighbors, but I still think its intrusion into that area is not, as I think Dave said, the highest and best use of that property.
Yeah, go ahead.
Tina, I'm just curious, parking for the cabin, I can't tell how that's done from the graphs I have or the display I have. It looks like that's green.
The parking spaces is kind of hard to see because it is green because it's colored that way. But it does show 2 parking spaces in front of, excuse me, in front of the cabins. And also there are other pocket areas where people at the cabins can park as well.
Is that concrete?
It will be concrete or asphalt.
Okay. Yeah, this is for anyone who has to sit in this seat, any of these seats, and have to vote when you have competing, you're reminded of Solomon and two claiming the same child. And in that way, it's our property is like that. It's like our child. It's an extension of who we are. And our neighbors is part of that extension. And so it's hard. One is I need to be able to dispose of my property the way I feel I need to. But in the context of a city and a community, there's a responsibility with that freedom. And so we come at this point where we have to balance that. For me, it's several things. I think one, it's highest and best use. So I look at it highest and best use. If this were single family homes and built with smaller homes, maybe the similar density, I think that people could probably get around that a little easier. I think that would be probably the highest and best use, but that's not what's being requested. And that's just my opinion. It doesn't make it right. I just think about highest and best use. And that's what we have to do, is look at highest and best use. The second one is recommendation from staff. Staff spent many more hours on this than I personally have. And they're recommending their recommendations. So those are two big things for me. But ultimately, it's difficult. I think for me, this is just my own personal opinion, is we are in a housing crisis in Central Texas. There are so many people that are living in homes that if they had to buy that home today, they wouldn't be able to afford it, because we all get appraisals. We see what the appraisals are doing. And so there's a need for lower income homes. And RV, I mean, if you look at KOA or any of the RV parks, usually fills up a full school bus. These are kids that are going to local schools. These are not vacationers. These are not people coming in for tourism. These are people that live and work in the area, and they've got to find a place that they can afford. And these have become that. And that's not a bad thing. It's hard to regulate that high density. So anyway, since everybody else shared the opinion, I felt I needed to share mine as well. And I feel for both sides on this. It's very hard. Sometimes it's almost a flip of a coin, and somebody's going to lose on that flip. But I think this is something you have to measure how we do that. So all that being said, any last comments before someone, and again, the chair will entertain a motion on this item. Well, if we don't have a motion.
I'll make a motion, David, to approve agenda item 6 is presented.
Second.
We have a motion. We have a motion and a second to approve agenda item 6. Any other comments before voting?
Just one quick one. Regarding the short-term rental comments from earlier, actually that ordinance discussion came from the first time this item was presented, because we had some challenges with the item, and then the short-term rental piece came up, and the very folks that were against this part could actually then open up a short-term rental. You could have 6 of them on your street if you wanted to. And so that's what started that conversation, that you probably wouldn't want that in your neighborhood either. And so I think this is a really hard balance, but since I voted for it twice, I'm still supportive of the project. So those are my comments, David.
Okay.
Mayor, can we vote with that?
Yeah, we'll
to.
do a roll call. I'll let you do the roll call. So any other comments before we do a roll call vote? All right, Amy, you lead the way.
Councilmember Carpenter,
No.
Councilmember O'Banion,
Aye, yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Holmes,
No.
Councilmember Covington,
No.
Councilmember Booker,
Yes.
Mayor Lee.
No. Craig Pearson.
He made the
He
second.
made the second.
He made the second, so he's.
Yes.
4-3 against.
Okay. All right. Thank you. We're sorry. It's close. It's a split. So sorry. All right. Item number 7, hold a public hearing and consider a zoning change from planned development retail and single family 2 residential with a conservation revitalization overlay to an amended planned development retail zoning district for the properties located at 510 South Main, 118 Avenue D, and 120 West Avenue D for the expansion of Mi Pueblo Restaurant. Thank everyone for coming. There's more.
Okay, thank you again, Mr. Mayor. This property is located off of South Main Street and at the intersection of, I'm sorry, I lost my pen, highlighter, and West Avenue D. This property is currently zoned amended plan development retail at the front where the restaurant is currently located. The two rear properties are zoned single family 2 with a CR overlay at that location. The applicant is the owner of the Mi Pueblo restaurant, and I don't see them here today. They're asking for an addition at the restaurant. They're going to expand into that residential area. They're looking at 2,560 square foot addition, a 70 square foot patio, and a revised parking layout. Here is what they are proposing. Here is the existing restaurant. They're looking at doing that addition in the back, and also the new patio will be at the front. As part of the review, staff recommended that they close off the intersection to South Main Street, apologize, since Avenue D was just close by and they could still get access off of Avenue D. And 2 accesses are actually proposed off of Avenue D and the third one off of South Pearl Street. And I also want to show this as well. This is their proposed landscape plan. As part of that, they're proposing a 6-foot tall wooden fence along the residential property line and in the front to help with the vehicle headlights going across the street on South Pearl. They're also proposing a 3-foot tall fence that will go around the big, where the Belton Heritage Tree is located to help shield that. And also there'll be some additional shrubs planted around that area to kind of help screen that fence, make it a little attractive. All right, so the previous zoning change that was approved for this area to allow for the expansion of the former restaurant, allow a couple of setbacks, but with the purchase of the rear properties, the rear setback reduction is no longer needed. They will meet the required reduction. What is required is a side yard reduction. They're requesting an 8-foot setback at the side area. Again, that's to allow for the existing encroachment that's already there with the restaurant and also for the new patio that they are proposing. The applicant has requested a reduction in parking based on our design standards. Applicant can do that if they're preserving some Belton Heritage Street. There are 2 trees in that area. There's a 48 diameter South Live Oak and also a 43 diameter Texas Live Oak that they are going to preserve. What's required for the total number of parking spaces for the size of the restaurant is 58 parking spaces. And they're looking at a 12% reduction in the standards and will provide 51 parking spaces. So I took some pictures of the trees that are currently there. This is the bigger one, the 48. And by the side, there is a smaller one, the 43-inch.
Small.
In the picture.
Tina, is there a minimum requirement for open area around those trees to make sure that they are not damaged by the asphalt?
There is a minimum circumference area. And I apologize, I didn't look at that to provide you tonight, but I will get that for you. But those routes are well established.
I thought there was a standard. I just wanted to make sure that we.
There is a
followed through on
standard.
that. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Those are beautiful trees.
Yes, sir. The proposed zoning change will allow for the expansion of the existing restaurant as shown in the conceptual plan. The lot exceeds the minimum requirement for the retail district. The lot is what's required, 7,000 square feet. They have over 33,000 square feet. The future land use map shows this as both residential in the front area closer to Main and single family, it shows this as commercial in the front area closer to Main and single family residential in the rear area. Notices were provided to property owners within 200 feet of the property. There was actually 1 email received. You guys have that. The neighbor was concerned about impacts to traffic in the area. The Planning and Zoning Commission heard this item at their last meeting. They voted to recommend approval of the zoning change. With that, staff has recommend the use of the property shall conform to the retail district in all aspect. An 8-foot side yard setback is allowed. A minimum of 51 parking spaces is required with the preservation of the 2 existing Belton heritage tree on site. Development of the lot shall conform to all type 5 design standards, which includes the site development as shown in the site plan. Landscape design standard, again, we have a site plan for that. Tree preservation and mitigation standards. A subdivision plat is under review and construction plans are currently under review for this. Any proposed future signs will have to meet our sign requirements. That concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
All right, so before we ask questions, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing, even though we don't have anybody signed up, but we will open just in case. So anyone who would like to speak in favor of or against this item, they may do so. There being no public comments, we will now consider the change. So any questions or comments? If not, the chair will entertain a motion.
I think it's good development. The one thing I'm concerned about is just the tradition to neighbors behind them. And I think one of the letters or one of the oppositions was an old family friend, Miss Dower. And we've known them for years and went to school with several of the kids and
Most of them.
I just hope we would be sensitive or pass along to the developer, please, any lighting or fencing or reduction in noise would greatly be appreciated.
Second that, yes.
You remember.
Oh, yeah.
So with that, I move we approve agenda item number 7.
Second.
All right, a motion and a second to approve agenda item 7. Any other comments or questions? It's a great little restaurant. I can't believe I go in there. It's so packed and it seems like there's only 2 parking places to begin with. And so it's they do a good job.
Neighborhood
So,
service.
yeah, absolutely. All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Passes unanimously. Item 8, I won't read the whole thing because it's being recommended that we postpone this until July 25th. So I think that would take a motion from council to postpone this item.
Move we postpone until July.
Second.
Right. A motion, and a second to postpone agenda item 8 to July 25th. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, passes unanimously. Next item is hold a public hearing and consider a zoning change from heavy industrial with SUP specific use permit for an electrical changeable sign to an amended heavy industrial with a specific use permit for electrical changeable sign. Seems like the same thing on approximately 0.269 acres located at 1701 East 6th Street at the northeast intersection of East 6th Avenue and Taylor's Valley Road. There's more.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is the same thing, but the details are a little different as far as what is required for the sides of the sign. So here is the location of the property. It is at the corner of 6th Street and Taylor's Valley. It currently has a billboard sign currently, and the applicant is requesting to change that. So again, the zoning, we amended it last year to allow for the heavy industrial with the SUP for electronic changeable sign. All right. So the applicant, there was some requirements on that last zoning ordinance that required it to be 240 square feet with a height of 35. However, doing some investigation, the applicant realized he was not able to reface the existing sign and he's requesting for a new sign to be installed, and it's going to be a 12 feet by 25 and a height of 40 feet. So here is what that sign would look like. On the east side coming into Belton will be electronic, the digital side. And on the west side, going out toward Belton, Temple, will be a static sign. Again, the overall height will be 40 feet. It's a monopole sign that is being proposed at that location now. Of course, this will have to meet all of the new standards that we adopted last year for digital signs, as far as the lighting, the blinking, the nuisance factors. That cannot violate that. And we also have an affidavit from the applicant that they will meet those requirements. For a billboard or off-premise sign, it is allowed in a heavy industrial zoning district. The size of a billboard sign, the maximum area is 672 square feet. The height of it is 42.5 feet. The applicant is also requesting to avoid future amendments to the zoning. He's requesting for the maximum allowable for a billboard off-premise sign. So here's a comparison chart. What's currently allowed is 48 feet for the width, 14 feet for the height of the sign. The overall area is 672 square feet and the maximum height of 42.5 feet. What was previously approved, and I apologize, I messed up on this. I was looking at some wrong information from an old Excel sheet that we had, and it was absolutely wrong. But I thought it was 22 by 83 by 10.5, which was 240 square feet. What's currently there, I believe, is 12 by 24 is what is currently there. So that information that I had last year was inaccurate, and the height of it was 35 feet at that time. So the current proposal is a 25 by 12. What is requested is the billboard, the maximum size that's allowed by billboard, which is the 48, the 14. 300 square feet is what he's requesting now. And he's looking at the maximum 672 square feet. And also the current height is 40, but he's requesting 42.5 for the maximum height to align with the billboard standards. In comparison to high profile signs along 35 and 14, we don't have a minimum width or height, but we require 225 square feet for the total area of the sign. And the height of it is 20 feet in areas that is not along Quarry or Center Avenue where there's the bridge. So they're allowed additional height up to 75 feet for their allowance off of 35 at that location. Notices were sent out to property owners within 200 feet of the property. We received no letters of support or opposition for the zoning change. The Planning and Zoning Commission heard this at their last meeting and recommended approval of the requested zoning change. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. The applicant is here. Should you have any questions for him?
All right, so we will start with a public hearing. Anyone who would like to speak in favor of or against this item, this is the time for the applicant to say, yay, yay, look at me.
I'm Matt Negley, 3501 Canyon Heights Road in Belton. Yay, yay, look at me. I'm really here just to answer any questions.
Okay, awesome. All right, thank you.
We see you.
All right. Any other public comments? There being none, we'll bring it back to the council and any comments or questions.
I do have a couple questions for the applicant. I'm just trying to understand, because this has been approved before. We're going from 288 to 300 square feet. And you're replacing the sign, because one of the pictures shows a second sign with the other one still in the background. I'm not sure if that was just
Can we bring
PowerPoint
up those pictures?
art.
Is that possible?
I'm seeing it in the packet.
I apologize. I did not put that in there. What is being proposed is a replacement. So once the new sign is constructed, the old sign will
Got
come
it.
down.
So you're gonna put up a 300 square foot sign
Yeah,
now,
I got it free.
but you want to not have to do this again in case you want to put in a larger sign in the
Yeah.
future.
So this artery, our largest sign is not appropriate, but it is on I-35. And I-35 and I-14, those signs, almost all of them are 14 feet by 48 feet. And that's not a mat size. That is an industry standard. And so if, down the line or something, we're trying to, I think, get ahead of it a little bit here and save y'all some time in the future. If for some reason we wanted to digitize something like a Don Ringler, that's a 14 by 48 digital sign or 672 square feet. And so, but what I'm just going to go back with the same size that's there now. It's a poster. It's also a standard size.
Just a little taller.
A little taller, yes.
But you could increase that if we approve the maximum at a later date.
Yeah, they would
I'm gonna
have
yield to
full
Ms.
freedom.
Moore on that one. I think.
Sorry?
I said, I think I'm going to yield to Ms. Moore on that one.
But he could increase that at a later date because we've approved the maximum.
Correct. Or because this is you can add conditions to this. If you wanted to add the limit, you could go ahead and limit to the 300 square feet. But this would give the applicant the opportunity to increase it in the future without coming back. But if there was a limit to it, a zoning change would be needed in the future should he want to change the size of the sign again.
Is this not gonna be electronic?
It will be.
Yeah.
One side.
One side.
Can you go back to the previous slide that just showed the options or whatnot?
Sure thing.
Just curious, why is only one side going to be electronic? That's not the real issue here, but just curiosity.
Yeah. Because the traffic pattern there, the traffic backs up like maybe even 3 signals right there.
Right.
And it's on the right-hand side. I mean, maybe someday if it's, if I can sell it, I'd maybe want both sides digital, but today it's just one side. The capital investment's pretty big. And so we want to make sure that we're successful there.
We'll have plenty of time to see it.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the plan.
Plenty.
So that kind of ties into the question I had. So the intent of this sign is to be like your other digital signs. It's basically a static sign that rotates every 10 seconds or something like that. So you're getting multiple advertisers, but it's not moving images. It's just replacing static images.
Correct.
right?
And the state polices that very, very closely.
Okay.
There's a lot of regulations to that and the brightness and it has to dim, at certain times of the day. So it's not, a beacon.
Okay. Okay.
And that was part of our SUP, is those conditions, right?
That has been adopted as part of our sign code, so that is required now by ordinance.
Yeah, I will say I've been one of the ones that really have been against digital signs, but over the last 10 to 20 years, pretty much every gas station has a digital sign for that. And I've seen that you guys are going much more digital than static sign, especially in the higher density areas with stoplights that you see those. And it's just really a higher tech way to display the same thing. My biggest concern is kind of the gaudiness and poor execution of a lot of digital signs that have flashing stars and fonts that don't thing. And the Dr. Pepper looks 10 times wider than it is. And it just looks poor. And I think, and so when it goes digital, it kind of opens up to the creativity. So anyway, but I think, with the state regulation,
Well, and I drive up and down 2305 every single day, and you've got 2 or 3 along there, and I always notice what's on them. Half the time it's United Way information, so it's good to see that it does rotate, and we're thankful for that. So I think if it's anything like those, I think it's a positive addition, and
It'll be the exact same
Yeah.
size. It's the one that is on 2305 that is on the neighboring property to Valvoline right there, or the exact same size as the one that's in front of BJ's Brew House. Our advertisers love them because they don't have to
you
buy a
see that
vinyl.
there
We
too,
can switch
waiting at
them,
the stoplight.
up all the time. And our landowners love them because we
I
give
know
them
exactly
a
what-
lot more money.
Location.
Yeah, I don't know if you need
I
a
do worry
motion, but.
To double in size without us ever seen it, but if nobody's worried about it, that's fine.
I think the only limitation I would put on it, I'm okay with the size increasing for the digital side facing away from Belton. Our whole thing is I forget what's the initiative, scenic cities. And the fact that you can't see the digital one from Belton, I don't know if that affects it at all. I don't know. I don't know. I'd hate to give the large one and then all of a sudden there's 2.
I think that because this property is surrounded by industrial and it's not gonna be shining over somebody's fence into their residential neighborhood a block away or 2 blocks away or whatever, I think it's fine. I would have, just as far as precedent goes, I would have a concern if we were blowing this thing up and it was gonna be shining into somebody's bedroom.
I'd like to make a motion, and I think those are valuable, so I'd like to make a motion to approve the item as presented.
Second.
all right, we have a motion and a second to approve this item. Any other discussion? There being none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Passes unanimously. All right. Thank you, Ms. Moore. All right, next we will be receiving a present. Thank you for. Yeah, go Tigers.
David, I wanted to make a comment. You mentioned something about wanting to do something about highways and having something. That'd be the candidate for working with, because
Yeah,
I feel like he'd be our most frequent flyer.
yeah, absolutely. I think
Mhm.
having some of those kind of guys are the right ones to help us with some ordinances around signage. So for future meeting. All right. So next is receiving a presentation from Raymond, our interim director at the HOP.
Thank you very much, Mayor, Council. I appreciate the opportunity to present our service proposal and funding requests for the Hill Country Transit District's new service plan. This has been quite a while in the making. In 2021, the Board of Directors of the HOP hired a consulting firm to give some options to the district about how to enhance mobility. This is coming off the back end or the shoulder of COVID. Many transit agencies across America have been suffering from lower ridership. A lot of that was just tectonic shifts in how people behave and travel patterns and the like. So on the back end of that consulting analysis, the board made a decision to hire the Hendrickson Transportation Group as a management company with significant expertise. They're out of Waco. I'm part of that group. I'm also, over the last, not to date myself, but multiple decades as a CEO, executive leader of transit authorities across the U.S. and delivering service. I can tell you that everyone is trying to figure out how to improve things. We think we have a very responsible, reasonable plan to move forward. We've been out across our 9,000 square miles talking to judges, commissioners, ISDs, councils, anybody that's listening about transit and has interest in it. We're here to present. So I'll try to make this as quick as possible. A lot has gone into this. So the consultant previous to Hendrickson came back with some findings that basically identified some real complications that needed to be addressed. First off, we're in one of the fastest growing regions, not only in the state, but in the country. The census data that just came out proved that there was additional growth. We know that this is a fast growing region, fast growing communities. But one of the main issues, this is across America. There was an article that came out just in the last few days about how local funding is probably one of the most important aspects of this. We have an opportunity to leverage significant federal dollars and state dollars with the Biden administration's approval of the infra grant. There's more money that's been available in multiple decades for transit. We have an opportunity to leverage that with local funds, but we need local funds to make that happen. For the existing service, I'm going to walk you through some slides, hopefully not put you to sleep, but it is pretty telling that our existing system is not very reliable. There's service disruptions. It's infrequent. It's not operating as expected. Again, this is not uncommon with what's happened with COVID and funding, and I'll walk you through what we're going to do about that here in a second. But here's a pretty telltale sign of really what's happened from a historical perspective. So at the pinnacle of service in 2013 and 14, we were carrying close to 1 million people. Our services consist of fixed route, what we call STS, which is paratransit and special services. And then we also offer rural service to our nine counties, 9 districts. In 2014, Health and Human Services changed their approach to delivery, going to a broker system. That change in and of itself wasn't a major issue, but the brokers started to work with a lot of different providers, not just with the Hill Country Transit District. And so we started to see a significant downturn in our revenue. So the district generated about $3 to $4 million a year in local revenue source that could be used to match against federal and state. And then roughly in 2016, we started to see some deterioration. And of course, you can see that area, the orange part really shrank in 2020, 21. So basically that was our local funding source that's pretty much gone away. We still have the federal and state sources, but we need a substitute for that funding source. And then as you can see in 2016, We started seeing the advent of Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, Amazon really taking on. That really got fueled with COVID when people started taking deliveries at home. And then because of all of these impacts in service reductions, as well as lower ridership, it just created literally a perfect storm, which required the transit agency to reduce the amount of service. Reducing that service negatively impacts the network quality. And so the real question is, what are transit authorities doing across America to improve things? For those who are not doing the analysis that we just did and boards not making the decisions that we're proposing, they're continuing to see a slide or very little, if any, growth. You can see from 20 to 22, we have seen some growth, but nothing compared to what we need in order to make the return on investment make sense and to ask cities to contribute. So if I were in your shoes, I wouldn't contribute if we weren't doing a better job and have a better plan moving forward. So what does that look like? Well, just again, a little bit more historical context from a planning perspective. If you look at this comparison of 2016, that red vertical line is where most planners in the US that understand transit. If you're to the right of the line, that's good. If you're to the left of that line, you probably need to rethink your business, or you're getting close to needing to make some decisions about how to move more of those routes across to the right of the line. That's basically the minimum standard for fixed route. The majority of our services in the past have been fixed route related. We do operate complimentary paratransit services. It's required by federal law if you're receiving Federal Transit Administration dollars to provide duplicative service for those that are not able to ride fixed route. Typically they're non-ambulatory, but some are also ambulatory that ride STS service. So that's that little orange bar at the very bottom, our STS service. But you can see in 2022, the ridership was significantly decreased. Part of that is because as we started dismantling the network, people have less opportunity to hop around literally and figuratively across the region. And so if they need to go beyond their fixed route, they can't easily do that. And so it has a multiplier effect impacting ridership. So that's at the end of 22, that's the ridership far to the left of that bar, which indicates that we need to do something different. So here's part of the problem. You can see all of these lines. It looks a little bit like spaghetti. Those are our current fixed routes. They run hourly headways, which is typically your minimum standard in the US if you're going to put fixed route bus service out there, but it's very, very basic. And typically you want at the minimum that fixed route service to be running bi-directionally, which means you have two buses running in different directions so that you're not having to hop on and travel almost an hour, minimum 30 minutes to get to your destination and then have to wait for another bus to pick you up to go back. So very, very inefficient, but it's what funding was available. If you're trying to make it across the region, you have to hop across multiple fixed route services, so it could take you quite a bit of time. And typically what you want with fixed route service, fixed route works best in higher density areas, which we don't have a lot of. And you want those routes to be very frequent. And in order to do that, you want them short and long in duration. And we have the opposite. So in addition to those fixed routes that you see in the multiple colors, we have that pink box. That's the area that we have to serve with the paratransit services, STS service, that's complementary to the fixed route. So you have multiple operators in the same area. And there's a better way to solve this problem. When we look at Temple and Belton, you have the same issue, long fixed routes, very windy. I use a technical term there, and operating in one direction. And so you can understand how the lack of ridership is not great. Your larger buses in suburbia don't do well around curves, and they tend to create potholes. And when they stop, they can increase traffic. And so obviously I'm a transit professional. It doesn't sound like it because I'm making a lot of bad comments about transit, But because I'm a transit professional, I know that there's always better ways to do things, and we need to make sure that we're working to progress that. So a little bit about our region. We know that there's a lot of growth opportunity. We see it, the anchor with Fort Cavazos. We did this presentation many times and we didn't want to change it, recognize that it's not Fort Hood anymore, but there's a lot of economic engines around here, including the medical industry. There's a lot of retail along 14 and 35. A lot of folks have opportunities to be employed along that. So transit can be, it's not always, but can be very supportive of an economic growth engine. When you look at the top 10 reasons across North America for companies relocating, transit's usually in the top 6 or 7 reasons. They want to make sure that there's education, that there's transportation, and so forth. And so, land use and other things are important. I've highlighted in yellow something that's very interesting from a regional perspective. We've had quite a few conversations with Fort Cavazos. They're very interested in improving the overall quality of life on base, not necessarily for the military personnel, but for the families that live there. Also off base, there's an interest, and they recognize that a lot of folks that live off base are part of the community, but they recognize that quality of life is really important. And so there is a proposal, I believe it's in Washington, D.C. at this point, to fund a $5 million budgeted project. No guarantees it'll happen, but to provide very similar services, this microtransit service that we're proposing in your neighborhoods as well on base. If that happens, there's a concept of connection fee, which will generate up to about $500,000 a year that can be used for a connector service to feed the region. When you look at return on investment, these are typically the ideas or the main variables that kind of identify the quality of the system that we have. Do people have access? What coverage area are we covering? Is it equitable? How much time do I have to wait for the service? How long do I have to travel when I'm on the service? What are the available hours? How do I use it? Is information readily available? And then ultimately, what does it cost me to use the service? And if we do all these things right, then we should see an increase in ridership, improvement of our on-time performance, and lower our cost, and just really have a lot of benefits. So these are the variables that typically transit looks at when we're trying to design a system. And typically a customer and stakeholders will look at those, and those are the areas that when people come to the podium and they have issues with the service, it's usually one of those 8 reasons that we're not covering well. So those are all the variables that we looked at when we were proposing the new system. The hours of operation today are about 12 hours. We're proposing initially to bump that up to 14 hours to get to 9 p.m. That'll take care of some of the retailers, not all of them that stay open, but we by and large for communities of your size, 7 to 9 p.m. is a pretty good level of service. If you go beyond that, productivity starts falling off and it costs you a lot more money. So that's what we're proposing. We also propose to continue the Saturday Medicaid and Medicare and paratransit trips from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And then we're proposing a commuter service that connects from Cove to Temple with stops in each of the major cities. We initially were proposing about a 30-minute frequency. We're looking at an hour frequency now with the idea that if Fort Cavazos comes online and we can work with the business sector, that we can generate additional revenue to pay for that commuter network. And by the way, we met with all 5 city managers. I think they're very supportive of the proposal that we're offering here. For your city, we're looking at 3 vehicles at peak and 2 vehicles off peak. Right now, we have 1 bus that's operating in that service area. So we think you'll have significantly enhanced service and access. So what does that look like? For the Temple UZA or the urbanized area, we've proposed, and this is just, this is a sample. This isn't the specific lines, or there's nothing that's been decided about exactly where where the zone is going to be. But as you can see, we're covering at least the same areas that we were covering before. But this would be basically with 3 vehicles that is more of a curb to curb service. And then just for making sure that we're complete with the concept here, as you can see, that kind of gold horizontal line is the connector route that we're looking at. These are the number of buses that we would see with the city of Killeen. We've met with their council. They've asked us to extend the size, or at least come back with some options to extend or expand their city services. Initially, we're starting with this coverage area to set the base. We are open to further discussions about adding hours of service or making changes to the actual lines. That will actually happen once we hire the software company that we will ultimately utilize. We'll get back with your communities and we'll go through a process of identifying exactly what streets will be covered. What we're trying to do is cover the largest density areas initially with the system, get the base service up and running, and then we'll be in a position to make changes as we move forward. So what is the service?
Really quick,
Yes,
while you have that up.
of course.
You got a little gray box or gray circle says designated transfer point. So if somebody wants to go from that purple area over to the blue area, they would take the purple, but one of the 4 purple buses into one of those gray little circles, and then a blue bus would pick them up at that gray circle and take them somewhere
Thank you
else?
for asking that question. So this was really the different colors was just to kind of segment the city and figure out approximately how many vehicles we need to carry enough people or to keep a 30-minute frequency. In reality, those buses won't have to stay in that zone. The whole area will be covered. These vehicles will initially start their day in those different areas, but they'll be able to traverse wherever they need to go.
So there's not a transfer point?
There's going to be
Oh,
transfer points.
Okay.
So the transfer point, to your point, is along the connector. There would be a designated transfer point where the bus will come in, and if you're on the microtransit, you would transfer over to the connector. It runs right now, proposed every hour. Currently, it's running about every 2 hours.
The reason, so if you go back to Belton, you put a transfer point where we don't currently have a transfer?
It's very possible, yes.
Yeah, they're at, around where the new Starbucks is.
We can put those wherever it makes the most sense.
So, but you're saying that there's a bus that runs through that point every hour?
There will be a bus running through that point
Through
every
those
hour.
gray spots somehow. It'll connect the gray dots.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And so it'll go from basically all your medical resources and Temple to Cove. So we were proposing 30-minute frequency.
Yeah. So it'd be an hour.
We just
Okay.
financially, we can't afford it at this
Yep,
point.
no, understood.
Yeah.
Yep. I was just trying to get my mind around that.
We may, as an example, in the green box, you see one bus. If you have to go from there, the likelihood is we will not require you to transfer where that green and purple area connect.
It sounds
We
like
may or
some-
we may not.
There's some flexibility there. If somebody wants to go from Belton to West Temple versus going from Belton to Copper's Cove, there might be some discretion available.
So the software is going to basically tell you what your travel requirement is going to be. So it'll tell it when you're looking at your travel, it's going to say we're going to drop you down to the Belton hub, and then you'll connect there and go to Cove and come back. So that way we're not taking vehicles out of service to go 35 miles and back. We're not going to be competing with each other's or the existing resources. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. So this is what the service will look like. So moving away from big buses to smaller vans. These vans are typically commercially available. That helps shed cost because you're using a Ford or Ram chassis. Most of the parts that are used are off the shelf parts. You can get them maintained at local dealerships. There are some modifications we make to make sure that they're wheelchair equipped. So we'll be able to basically use the same vehicles to provide paratransit service and all types of services with the same vehicles. The software has progressed over the last, I'd say, decade and a half to allow us to do that. And you can see that it blends well. It's going to make it a lot easier to get in and out of neighborhoods, to provide curb to curb service. It'll have less impact on your local roads, and will improve the travel speed on the roads because you won't have buses, stopping and blocking traffic and that sort of thing. It will be a curb to curb service. You download a software app on a phone. If you don't have a phone, we have a phone number that you can call to schedule trips. That's the way a lot of the paratransit and current dollar ride service works today. We have the ability, if you're at specific locations, to go to those locations and be picked up if necessary. It works similar to Uber and Lyft, but it's a transit version of that. We will have vehicles with qualified operators. They have to go through drug and alcohol testing and training. They will be certified to deal with wheelchairs and the like. So a lot of the issues that folks typically would have that are non-ambulatory won't have to worry about that with Uber or Lyft, because we'll be providing those services. We have made a provision in the budget to include some Uber and Lyft, so that will give us the ability, if you currently within your zone don't have access to a medical facility outside of the zone, we'll be able to customize that for you to make sure that your citizens are getting to and from. And then as we are able to monitor and manage that cost, we can sit down with the city and talk about what we may or may not want to do moving forward. Pretty simple. We'll go through a process. Once we have our software vendor selected, you literally sit down with a map and you move the areas around to make sure that we're picking up all your major grocery stores and this neighborhood versus that. We typically stay away from less dense populated areas, because the further you have to travel, the fewer people you're picking up, the less that vehicle is available to provide services to someone else. And so it is about a bit of management. We don't necessarily propose covering the four corners of your city, but if that's something that you want us to look at in the future, we can certainly do that. Once you install the software and you start running it, immediately you start seeing where people are getting picked up and dropped off. This is called a heat map. And the heat map kind of tells you where people are using the system. Red means there's a lot more people. Yellow means there's obviously fewer than that. But you can see pretty well just in this example, and this is true across most places in America that have deployed this type of service, that you get usage almost in every corner of the zones that you identify. The orange or red is typically where you have a lot of retail. It's very analogous to what we see along 14 and 35 here. So I would expect to see very similar patterns and what I've seen in other deployments in other cities across the US. And then you get a lot of rich data that kind of shows you the number of passengers, literally by hour, or split it down to minute if you want. But it gives you some ideas, much better planning tools rather than trying to guess. You're actually getting real-time data of consumption. So as we use the system, we can come back and report often and let you know how your dollars are being spent, where it is, where the usage is, not only by date, but by time of day, literally by hour, how long people are waiting on the system. So as wait times go up, as usage patterns start identifying themselves, that we have a tremendous amount. We have very high wait times at, let's say, early in the morning during commute hours. And they're all coming from the same geography. That might make sense to come back and identify where a fixed route might be, but there's no reason to use fixed routes until we identify how the service is actually going to be used. And then just a little bit on what your current ridership is. It comes from two places, your Route 610 and a portion of the connector that runs from Killeen to Temple. But your average passengers for the year is about 15,000. We're expecting at least 25,000. That number was bigger when we thought we were going to have 30-minute headways, but again, due to just financial constraints, we can't offer that 30-minute connector service. So it does have a little bit of an impact, but it's a significant increase in ridership. over the prior year. And what we're expecting, the initial presentations that I made, because your city manager asked me how much it was going to cost at the time. I wasn't quite sure because we didn't have federal funding commitments, which typically don't happen until about this time. We just received federal and state allocations, which were a little bit better than what we anticipated. We also received about $900,000 from the COG for carbon reduction. And with the tweak in the commuter service, our original proposal was around $131,000. I know that was significantly more. We were able to get it to $55,000, but we believe that the additional enhanced service is going to make a major impact in your community. And then at the bottom, we want you to just see how that your local funds are leveraged up. So for roughly 7.6% of the total cost of $724,000, you might ask, well, where's the rest of that money coming from? Well, that's from the federal and state grants that we get to match against to provide the services. And that concludes my presentation and our budget request, and happy to answer any questions the council may have at this point.
All right. Any questions? All right. So at this point, it's just a presentation. Oh, sorry.
I don't have any questions, but I just wanted to say that I'm personally very excited about this opportunity. As we see transportation being the number one issue for many of our folks, this is potentially transformational. So I'm excited that when council can discuss and consider that.
Thank you.
I appreciate the presentation for
would
the
just
second
add-
time, and I may hear it
Sure.
again tomorrow.
Yeah,
I
I believe
think.
tomorrow, right? I just to add that Raymond, Daryl worked very, very hard with the region to try to come up with a plan that is really transformational and tries to address the need all across the region. And so I believe their experience and proposal here really offers something that will change the character of service delivery and transportation in the region. So really looking forward to working with the budget and trying to see if something that's less than twice of what we've been setting aside in recent years would really be an enhanced level of service.
Yeah, there being no action. Yeah, I was going to go into that, just comments. I agree. I think one of the things that I've always been concerned, at least in Belton, is it's not a heavy use of the current hop, but I think there's a large need. And I think this actually addresses the need that we have within the city a lot better. Kind of that Uber model. I think it's really good. And hopefully the software support and all of those kind of things. And also these kind of, whatever these kind of regional vans now with Amazon running this stuff everywhere. These kind of vans have become really economical. So
excellent.
Any other comments?
Just one, and boy, I appreciate the service. And the one thing I would ask is if there is some type of drop off, pick off, wait area, if we could do everything we could possible to make sure that that's covered somehow. But I've seen some people waiting for the hop in the freezing cold and downpouring rain. They just killed me.
I am so glad you mentioned that because we left that out of this just for time's sake. But the beauty of this system, and I'm sorry, it is late in the day. So my enthusiasm level isn't typically where
Ours is way up there.
But I will tell you,
all the way to the end.
I'm excited for you for this service. I really am excited for you for the service. It is transformational. The difference of this is you don't have to think about transit stops the way we used to, right? Because every curbside is a transit stop. You don't have to wait in the cold or in the heat. And look, I'm a 5th or 6th generation, still haven't figured that out, Texan. And we all know how hot it is out there right now. It also gets cold and hail and wind and rain. A lot of people that have issues traversing our townships because they're in wheelchairs or there's the infrastructure doesn't exist. So in most transit agencies across America, you get a bus stop in the middle of a grassy area that can turn into mud. And that happens most of that infrastructure doesn't exist. You don't have to worry about that anymore because the vehicle's coming to your curbside. That means that you can be more productive at your home. You don't have to wait. The whole concept of of wait times when you're at a bus stop. If the vehicle's delayed, you get irate, you get a customer complaint. Today, you go about your business because you can be more productive because you know what time your vehicle is going to show
Yep.
up.
What about the transition locations though? Like if you're gonna take me where I get off of this van and wait on that bus.
We will identify, those are typically in higher traffic areas where there's retail. That's why we want to work with your community. to
Hang out at
identify that.
Walmart until it's about 2 minutes out or.
Whether, exactly right, whether it's Walmart or Starbucks
Yeah.
or something that's in the area. Of course, we have to work with the business to make sure that they're okay with it. Many cases they are, because that means that they have staff that can actually use transit to get there. They have customers that are waiting and hopefully buying another cup of coffee or shopping or doing whatever they need to do. So it just makes your communities more livable. I think that's one of the things that all communities, I think, strive for, to make sure that your dollars are being spent where they should, that it's easier to get around, and ultimately that your community is more livable. And we're really excited about delivering this service for you.
Right.
We appreciate it. This is a great step forward. I was afraid at one point we were going to lose service altogether. This gives more people the opportunity to come to downtown Belton. So we appreciate it.
Well, and I think our board, and I appreciate that, thank you. I think our board was recognizing that at some point you have to look at the decision is it worth the money that's being spent? And based on the ridership and all the analysis that we've done, I would have a hard time saying continue to invest in something, start paying for something that obviously is underperforming, and we have no desire to make that happen for you.
Awesome.
So thank you.
Yep, thank you. And also thank you and the HOP and also SITCOG and whoever's getting the grants to bring that 700 and something thousand down to 55. That's really good. Yeah. All right. So, yep. So general consensus, we like the idea. So looking forward to that budget amendment in the future. Next item is hold a public hearing and consider an ordinance on second and final reading granting the franchise to Encore Electric Delivery Company. So we will, I guess, close the council meeting, open a public hearing. If anybody at this point has the energy to speak for or against Encore. There being none, we will close the wait.
Casey's here.
Oh.
Poor
Thank you
fella.
so much for. Yeah.
Cynthia, did you just wake him up?
Poor thing.
All right. There being no rush for the microphone, we will close the public hearing and we will now entertain a motion for the ordinance on final reading.
I move to approve agenda item number 11.
Second.
Motion a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed. Passes 6-0. 6-0. Yeah. My math isn't
Thank you,
working anymore.
Casey.
All right, the next item is appointment and reappointments to the following boards and commissions. I'm going to read these. They're not on this page, but I'm going to read these. We will be appointing to the Parks Board, Ted Smith, Diane Ring, and Jason Wolf, all serving 2-year terms. I will be leaving the TERS, Tax Increment Reinvestment Zone, and I will be appointing Council Member Stephanie O'Banion. Planning and Zoning, the terms of Quentin Lachlan, Dave Jarrett, and Zachary Kruger will end on June 13th. Additionally, David Covington resigned to join us here. So we are now, Mr. Lachlan and Jarrett have expressed a desire to continue to serve. And so we will be reappointing them. And we also will be appointing Dominica Garza and Justin Reese for those 2-year terms. The next one is Joe Shepherd has resigned from BEDC, and I'm appointing Councilmember John Holmes. Finally, I'm not going to read all these. We will start new subcommittees to help focus our various boards and commissions and staff and citizens on quality of life, governance, economic development, and facilities. So again, I won't read these names, but they are in this. So now I think I've read all of that. Chair will entertain a motion and or discussion.
Move we approve agenda item number 12.
A second.
We have a motion and a second for agenda item 12. Any other discussion? There being none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, passes 6-0. That's item 12. All All right, item 13 and 14. So item 13, receive a presentation to discuss proposed amendments to the city Belton fee and rate schedule. Amy, it's the Amy show.
All right, proposed changes to this year's or this upcoming fiscal year's fee and rate schedule. There's not many. The planning department has requested to add the word flat work to their driveway permit fees because they don't have one for just a slab, something small. So we're adding that. Under the zoning and subdivisions category for plats, we're doing a flat $50 filing and recording fee. Right now, we're having to send it off to be recorded and come back and try to figure out how much that costs and then billing the person for it. So we figured it would average out if we just charged a flat $50 up front.
I'm sorry, I can't hear Amy at all.
Can you hear me now?
That's better. Thank you, ma'am.
All right. The library has requested to change their faxes from 20 cents a page to 25 cents a page, but giving the first 12 pages for free. That matches their copies as well. Under short-term rentals, we've added that section to allow for initial applications at $50 and the annual renewals at $50. That was the ordinance that you passed recently. And then under open records requests, the cost for those accident reports and fire incident reports actually went up to $6 last year. We didn't catch that, so we're going to catch up and change it from $5 to $6. We're adding 2 new fees under the water tapping and meter fees for contractor installed water taps at $300 and contractor installed fire line taps at $200. Those fees are just to cover the inspection costs to the city. And then under sewer rates, we're talking about changing the base rate from $16.25 for the first 2,000 gallons to $17.38. And then the volumetric sewer rate from $7.50 per 1,000 gallons to $8. And there's no action required of the council tonight. This will come forward to you on your August 11th meeting for approval. Glad to answer any questions.
Any questions? Called negotiation fatigue.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Amy. All right. Item 14, conduct a work session on fiscal year 2024 budget considerations, including but not limited to the following: hotel motel, tax increment reinvestment zone, IT fund, building maintenance fund, and Belton Economic Development Corporation fund. Mr. Rogers.
Okay, Mayor and Council, if you'll give me 17 minutes, we'll get through these 43 slides. Okay, we're wrapping up our budget.
Dave's timing you.
Okay. We're wrapping up our budget, so we're going to talk about some of those other funds.
15 seconds.
As long as you approve, everything's fine with me. We'll go home. So the hotel fund, hotel motel tax fund is where we keep track of our 7% hotel occupancy tax that we receive. Those funds are supposed to be used to directly enhance and promote tourism in the tourism industry. So for fiscal 24, we expect to have revenues of $444,000 and $362,000 worth of expense. That would increase our fund balance to just under $900,000 that you see there by the end of fiscal 24. So how does this look compared to previous years? In the current year, we had a budget of $288,600. It looks like we're going to come in better. You can see a big increase there in the city taxes. Next year, we'll increase hopefully to $403,000 with $155,000 increase from one budget year to the next. So what causes that? I'm budgeting for 24, our typical growth that we've been seeing around 19%. I do not have any short-term rental, any additional short-term rental revenue in the proposed budget, only because I don't really know how much that's going to be yet. It won't be all that substantial anyway. Bell County does pay us its 2% hotel occupancy tax, and then we turn around and give it back to the county, giving it to the expo. And then interest income, we talked before that it's higher in this year's estimate, and we're going to lower it a little bit for 24. 40% of the expenditures in the hotel motel tax fund go towards tourism sponsorship, as it should. In 2024, there's a large capital outlay that you'll see soon. So comparing on a budget to budget basis, 2023 to 2024, our expenditure budget in 2023 was 168,180. Looks like we're going to come in right around that number. Next year, 362, 350, and I'll explain the increases there. So the biggest expenditure that we have in a hotel is for tourism, like we said. These are some of the larger items that we have there. Christmas on the Chisholm Trail, Bacon Blues and Brews, 25 each. There's a lot of other events that we contribute towards. That's 69.5. In 2024, we plan on including 25,000 for a solar eclipse event to be held here somewhere in the city. In addition to that, that large capital item that we have in there is $100,000 we have budgeted for a stage. Don't have a clue if 100,000 is way too much or way too little at this point. If it's over $50,000, you'll see that one again anyway, because it's got to come back to council.
Mike, I have a question about that.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't believe that expense falls in one of the 9 categories that are approved expenses for hotel motel. So can we check on that?
We will certainly check on that.
Thank you. The stage.
Yeah.
Is it too late to get Bonnie Tyler? She can come sing Total Eclipse of the Heart for the special. Anyway.
There's been some uproar of spending hotel money on particular things like Julio Iglesias down in the valley. Anyway, that's a whole different story. Okay, so a couple of things the legislature did to us. I just want to point out. House Bill 3727, which is now law, requires cities to put aside or allocate towards advertising the amount of 1% of the room rate. So in other words, it's like our total rate is 7%. So it's 1/7 of our total revenue would have to allocate towards advertising. So that number is $60,000 compared to the current year, which is closer to 25.
So advertising what? Anything?
Your hotels and
Okay.
things like that. That's
So we can just basically rebate them for getting a sign on a Lamar sign somewhere in Salado to say, come see Belton or something. Okay.
yes.
Gotcha. Awesome. Thank you.
I wasn't living here.
So another very interesting thing that's happened in that same bill is that cities are prohibited from contributing to a visitor information center that's not exclusively used for a visitor information center. I can tell you the genesis of this. When you have a lot of hotel money, there was cities that would say, okay, I've got millions of dollars of hotel occupancy tax revenue. I need to build a new city hall. Let's put the visitor center in city hall and then we'll use hotel money to build city hall. That's kind of the genesis of that.
Sounds like a great idea.
Sound like a great idea. We can't do that any longer. In fact, our visitor information center that says visitor information center, it also shares with the Chamber of Commerce and EDC. That's going to prohibit us from actually doing hotel money for that purpose. However, through the magic of accounting, I can take care of that for you.
Well, and
So,
not.
2 + 2, what do you need it to be?
Right.
A quick comment about that, because I asked about that down at the legislature because I was watching this and paid attention to that because I was concerned about, because I knew that we paid. And I'm not opposing you wanting to pay for it out of somewhere else, but that's like us leasing some space from another entity, and you can still do that, I asked. It's about doing exactly what you said. And you can still use this money for a visitor center if there's a space that's primarily used as a visitor center,
Right.
which the chamber is. But I'm not opposed to paying out it somewhere else because that's more money to spend on other tourism related items.
Yeah, so what we can do with that, first of all, our contribution is we're planning on increasing our contribution to the chamber for the visitor center support from 12,500 to 15,000. However, what we'll do is we'll make the general fund will pay for that payment to the visitor center. But then what we'll do is increase the hotel occupancies reimbursement to the general fund for part of Judy's time by the same amount. So the general fund will net zero. It's just coming from a different pocket, making it more or less legal. Okay. Tax increment reinvestment zone. Okay, we talk a lot about the TERS. The incremental property values within the tax increment zone gets deposited to the TERS fund. We recently expanded our TERS boundaries to over 4,000 acres now. And the proceeds from that can be used for projects that are approved by both the board and city council. So for fiscal 24, we plan on having $3.2 million worth of revenues and just over $3 million worth of expenses, increasing reserves by $257,000 to $1.3 million. 65% of the revenue into the fund comes from the city, but the county contributes 34% of that revenue into the TERS. So let's compare current to next year. 2.8 million is the current. We're probably going to come in a little less than that in 23. There's a $450,000 increase in 2024 compared to 2023's budget. So why again is that? Well, the TERS values, we still don't have final values for the TERS, but the last one that I saw looks to be like an $88 million increase to $394 million. So the city contribution would increase by 19%, and that's assuming this tax rate of 54.22. That 54.22 is my modified no new revenue rate. So still, as we mentioned before, when we talk taxes, don't focus on a particular rate at that time because it's still too early. Instead, focus on the term no new revenue, and that's still where we would be under this scenario. The rate just may be a little bit higher. The county contribution would also grow. And I have on here, assuming a 29-cent tax rate. Again, I have no clue what the county is going to do with its tax rate. What I did was said, how much is our rate declining, and decline their rate by the same, and kind of just get one of those. Okay. On the expenditure side, expenditures are fairly comparable. $300,000 increase over fiscal 23. The big difference is there in transfers, and we'll cover that shortly. So other changes, consulting expenditures go down by $10,000 because we're completing that Imagine Belton plan now. No debt service any longer in the TERS. Facade improvement grants, we're increasing from $125,000 to $150,000. And then the transfers for capital projects is a very, very large fund, large amount. The TERS is willing to contribute $1.6 million for Connell and $1.2 million for the cash match for East Central Avenue Bridge relocation. Huge projects that the TERS can contribute to.
With an increase of 350,000, is any consideration for TERS doing a little street maintenance along the way?
We have to talk about street maintenance and make sure that we can do that. We got some things to talk about first before we put that in there. IT fund. So we have two internal service funds. IT is one of those. This is kind of makes sense. This provides IT services for the entire city. Revenue comes from user charges. But we need to make sure that we have enough fund balance for those future things that we're going to do. So in 24, $1,050,000 of revenue, $935,000 of expenditures, $114,000 increase to fund balance gets us to $430,000 by the end of 2024. 78% of the money that comes into this fund comes from the general fund. So comparing a budget to budget year, in fact, fiscal 24's budget goes down by $53,000 on a revenue basis. We were doing some projects and things in 23 that we don't have to do in 24. So the allocation fell slightly. Costs from IT are mostly this maintenance. That's mostly computer software maintenance agreements, those kind of things. 33% of the budget is the personnel. So on a budget to budget basis, expenditures also fall by $30,000 from 2023. Again, personnel costs go up a little bit, but it's worth noting just for you to see. We pay almost $425,000 for software agreements, over 60 different software agreements that Chris has to keep up with. That's why we consolidated the management of IT services into one group and to have one manager over all of that stuff. as opposed to having it spread all over different departments. That's the reason we created this fund. Capital outlay goes down because again, that's the stuff that we bought, these video surveillance equipment and stuff we did in 23. We don't need to do in 24. Moving on to building maintenance. Again, this is for building maintenance of city facilities. So we have $547,000 worth of revenue, $452,000 worth of expenditures. Plan for 2024 raises reserves to $273,000. Again, general fund makes up most of the contributions into this fund. So on a budget to budget basis, the increase is $53,310. You can see kind of the increase from $494 to $547. Most of the expenses in this division are personnel, 69%, 17% maintenance. On a budget to budget basis, it looks like this again, a $30,000 increase in expenditures. And I'll talk about those in a little bit. So personnel costs again causes personnel costs to go up. We're going to buy a paint sprayer and a refrigerator, so that causes supplies to go up. And then the bigger cost comes from material costs for the building maintenance projects that we're doing. And that's a big driver in that increase. Also HVAC. I think the last one that I'm going to talk about, am I still within my 17 minutes almost?
15 seconds.
Okay. BDC is the purpose of any public purpose of the city. So you can read that. I'm not going to read that. BDC focuses on job retention, job creation, and capital investment. That's its purpose. And the revenue that it has comes from the 1/2-cent sales tax. So for 2024, there's revenues of $3,555,000 and expenditures of $1,987,000, which would have a $1.5 million increase to fund balance to get you to $11,387,000. One thing to note is there's lots of land purchases kind of in a state of flux right now, awaiting some final decisions on. So that fund balance that I'm showing you there may be significantly less by the time we get to adoption. I'm just telling you that's happening. On the revenue side, again, most of the revenue here comes from sales taxes. Let's say, and I'm expecting sales tax again to increase by 5% over the current fiscal year.
Mike, can you just go back real quick?
Yes, sir.
Significant increase in budget versus estimate for revenue for 2023. Is that right?
That is a good question. So that $1.5 million you see there is a land sale of some of the land at the business park that goes under that miscellaneous income. So 5% increase on sales tax revenue. Most of the money is going to be spent on transferring into capital projects. And you'll see that here. So there's a $1.3 million transfer there that's moving money from the BDC's operating fund into its capital project fund. And that is going to fund the sewer at on I-14. That project is currently in the works. And again, we know that might change. We're still talking about all that sort of stuff, but that's currently what's in the fiscal 24 budget. So I went through that quickly.
Yeah, that was quick. You made it.
Okay. So our next meeting is when I'll officially give you a proposed budget for fiscal 24. Please use the previous 3 budget meetings that we've had as you're reviewing your 24 budget, to answer questions. If you have any questions and stuff of what's going in there, this is kind of the deepest level that I'm going to go into in details as we move forward. Any other questions or concerns?
It's fast.
It was fast. Yeah, this is important stuff, and apologies to everybody in the room that the meeting has gone on very long and attention span usually goes down with the length. So
yes,
inversely proportional. So I'd encourage council to review these if you have a few minutes, and if you have any questions, reach out to Mike directly or Sam, and we'll do that. So again, thank you guys for being here. There being nothing else on this piece of paper, we will call this meeting adjourned.
I hope so.
Thanks, Craig.
You're right.
9
Thank you all.
o'clock. Probably
Good
past your bedtime.
As a matter of fact. Good night, y'all.
Well, you go.
No. I'm not going first. Some other no has to go.